And in the wake of those beheadings, Egypt's Christian community is in mourning. The video released by ISIS was titled "A Message Signed in Blood to the People of the Cross," appearing to specifically target the Coptic Church. Allegedly, this attack was in response to the treatment of a Coptic priest's wife who had converted to Islam back in 2010 and was then held against her will. Egyptians frequently travel to Libya looking for work, and the Christians were among thousands crossing the border when they were captured last month. David Bruns has more on the brutal murders.
Anguish and grief etched on faces. These are the relatives of some of the 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians first kidnapped in Libya and now feared dead. A video purporting to show their mass beheadings released Sunday by militants affiliated with the Islamic State group. 13 of them from this village in central Egypt. Overnight, Egyptian warplanes hit targets in Libya in retaliation. But here, that does little to assuage the pain.
Al-Sisi's military strikes are not enough. All of these strikes are not enough. The blood of the victims is not cheap. These strikes are against infidels. He should have struck them earlier.
For others, the desire is simply finding closure after weeks of uncertainty since their relatives were kidnapped.
I demand the international community and President Al-Sisi bring back the bodies of the victims, even if they were thrown in the sea. And if they had burnt them, then they should bring us their ashes.
Until then, smoke rises from the incense burning in the village's only church. Prayers for the victims. While dark questions hang in the air, does this latest attack signal that the Islamic militant group has established a new affiliate site in Libya, just 500 miles south of Italy?
And to another developing story on prisoners captured at the hands of ISIS. The fate of 17 captured Kurdish troops remains on the line after ISIS releases a video of the men being driven through the streets in cages. The prisoners are wearing orange jumpsuits as they are paraded through the crowd. According to social media reports, the Islamic State is planning to burn them alive, the very same method of execution these militants used to kill a 26-year-old Jordanian pilot, you recall, last month. The story, like the previous one, speaks for itself, but I do want you to know I feel the weight of this as I say it. And while the threats of what will happen to these men cannot yet be verified, military experts do not expect the fighters to survive this. Italy, meanwhile, weighing its options as it considers military strikes against Islamic terrorists in Libya. Officials in Rome say Italy should be ready for military intervention if diplomatic efforts don't succeed. ISIS jihadists are advancing through Libya, and the president of the Senate Defense Commission warns illegal African migrants pose a terrorist threat. The idea of intervention is gaining ground as Italy is just 500 miles away from the Libyan coast.
In order to fight the Islamic State group, I want to strongly emphasize that we also need to be ready to make our military resources available for a possible international initiative. But this is not on the agenda right now. Now what's on the agenda is a strong political diplomatic initiative.
The movement is also drawing political support as Egypt carries out airstrikes against Islamic State strongholds in Libya. In one recent video released by the terrorists, one of the jihadists boasts of plans to conquer Rome. Authorities in Denmark, meanwhile, are trying to determine the extent to which a gunman was aided in shootings over the weekend as Copenhagen works to recover from the attacks. 2 men are in jail for allegedly helping the suspect evade police as authorities conduct raids in the capital. Meanwhile, thousands of people, including the Danish and Swedish prime ministers, are expected at memorials this evening. Julie Noche has more for us on the situation and residents' reactions to this shooting.
The mood is somber in the Danish capital, Copenhagen, Monday morning after shooting incidents left 2 people dead and 5 others injured over the weekend. Security was tight during the morning commute.
I feel very sad, and mostly I'm sad because of all the hatred it caused afterwards. I hope we all remember we're all human, and and no, not religion is the cause of anything of this.
I went out last night, and you can feel it on people. That's a shame, I think. But hopefully it'll take some days and we'll all go back to normal as we can.
A 22-year-old Danish-born gunman was shot dead by police after he killed one person at an event promoting free speech and another at a Copenhagen synagogue. The quiet streets reflect widespread shock in a country that prides itself on its reputation for safety and social tolerance. Danish officials have said the gunman had a record of violence, gang-related activities, and weapons possession. Police have charged 2 other people with aiding the suspected gunman.
France increases the security presence at Jewish sites throughout the country in the wake of the attacks in Copenhagen. Following the shootings in Denmark this weekend, hundreds of Jewish tombstones were damaged, contributing to the decision to mobilize security forces. This coming shortly after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urged European Jews to immigrate to Israel. France's interior minister, though, says the recent measures have nothing to do with Netanyahu's remarks, which he suggests may have been politically motivated.
I know there is an election campaign in Israel, but leaving that aside, there is also a reality in France, which is the will of this government to ensure the protection of French Jews.
The French official said 10,000 troops and police officers are now deployed throughout the country to protect synagogues and Jewish institutions. He adds an investigation is currently underway to determine whether there is any link between the Danish shootings and last month's attacks in Paris. Taking you to Ukraine, this is the scene in the ruined city of Donetsk, where the crash of artillery shells can still be heard despite a recent ceasefire. The city, we know, has been the center of fighting for 8 months as rebel forces battle for control against the Ukrainian army. After a bomb explosion in a city building, an official for the self-proclaimed republic blamed the Ukrainian government for violating the truce.
It was the Ukrainian government forces that were shooting us just now. They used 120mm caliber mortar shells. We will only fight back after they open fire toward our position.
And renewed fighting broke out just 2 hours after the new treaty was set to go into effect on Sunday. Neither side here seems willing to stand down, with tanks and armed troops manning their posts in nearby villages. Elsewhere in an eastern Ukrainian town, pro-Russian rebels continue to battle Ukrainian army forces. Kiev responded by saying it will not pull back its heavy guns until the militants stop their fighting. Monterebi has more as the fragile peace deal falters.
Ukrainian government forces are encircled in the eastern town of Debaltseve, a strategic railway hub. They're sandwiched between rebel positions and are being pounded by shelling. The fighting means a European-brokered peace deal that included Russian President Vladimir Putin is on the verge of collapse just 1 day after a ceasefire took effect.
The shelling doesn't stop, and although Putin said there is a ceasefire, it does not make any sense. We don't know ourselves what's going to happen. I have to run as there's not much time left.
The fighting in Ukraine subsided in many parts of the east after the ceasefire began. But in Debaltseve, where most of the intense fighting has taken place in recent weeks, the truce appears to be stillborn. Rebels have been advancing on the town since January and say they have no intention of observing the truce.
Debaltseve is our land. It is not Ukrainian, and we will take it as it is our land and it is our people there.
Instead, separatists surrounding Debaltseve offered government troops a safe corridor to, quote, get out of here, a proposal the government rejected. Under the peace deal, government forces were to pull back heavy weapons from the front line, something Ukraine says it won't do as long as this fragile truce is being violated.
We're following breaking news right now. Japan has issued a tsunami advisory after a magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck off its northeastern coast. The quake hit on Tuesday at approximately 8 a.m. local time. Officials say a possible 3-foot tsunami could hit the coast, but it is not expected to cause any damage. There were no immediate reports of damage or injuries, and authorities are warning people to stay away from the coast. The earthquake struck in the same region hit by a devastating earthquake and tsunami back in 2011. Of course, we'll stay on top of this for you, bringing you more as additional information comes into our newsroom. And straight ahead on One America News, firefighters in West Philadelphia are battling fire and ice at a 2-story commercial building. We have the very latest from there. Plus, a Wisconsin judge weighs in on whether 2 girls should face trial in the bizarre Slender Man case of attempted homicide. Those stories and more as One America News continues. Welcome back. It might sound obvious what President's Day is supposed to celebrate, but the history behind the holiday is a little more complicated than you might think. One America's Kyle Warnke tells us how today's tradition isn't quite what its founders originally had in mind.
The history of President's Day goes all the way back to the late 1800s, but the debate over what the holiday actually represents is still active in 2015. It was originally established to honor America's first president, George Washington, by being set on February 22nd, his birthday. An Arkansas senator proposed the holiday, which was eventually signed into law by President Rutherford B. Hayes in 1879. Until the creation of Martin Luther King Jr. Day more than a century later, it was the only national holiday to celebrate an individual American icon. But it wasn't long before it was given another purpose, and Washington would have to share his day of honor. In 1971, Congress passed an act that shifted many federal holidays to Mondays in an effort to give employees more 3-day weekends and cut down on workplace absences. The holiday of Washington's birthday thus changed to the 3rd Monday of February. Since it no longer fell on the president's actual day of birth, a lawmaker from Illinois successfully lobbied to have the event include President Abraham Lincoln, who was also born in February. From here on, the tradition began to take on a life of its own, as individual cities and states customized it as they saw fit. Today, at least half of the states recognize the date as President's Day, although the federal government still labels it as Washington's birthday on official calendars. The president's hometown of Alexandria, Virginia, for example, holds events throughout the entire month of February. Meanwhile, some states have added their own figures to the celebration, such as Alabama, which honors both Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Arkansas takes even more license with the date and honors a historical figure who wasn't even a president, civil rights activist Daisy Bates. But President's Day is still rooted in Washington's legacy. The Purple Heart, a decoration proposed by the general that honors troops who were wounded or killed in battle, was first awarded on his birthday. And there are still plenty of parades and historical reenactments held in his honor. Washington helped establish America's ideals of freedom and democracy, but he probably didn't predict that its citizens would take plenty of liberties with his own birthday. Kyle Warnke, One America News.
Finally tonight, the Aurora Borealis has been revered by many ancient cultures and long fascinated people all around the globe. Well, now in their search for the spectacular northern lights, 2 filmmakers are looking to capture some of the magic in the skies high above the earth. Jillian Kitchener takes us to the Arctic island of Svalbard for more.
The Northern Lights have been dazzling visual journalists for years, and these documentary filmmakers say they can look up for hours and just go into a trance.
Northern Lights are geomagnetic storms coming from the sun. Usually take up to 3 days before they enter the magnetic poles. It's different gases as well who creates different colors, like purple, green, or red. So just big solar storms coming through the magnetic poles.
Over the last 3 months, they've spent most nights in the mountains of Svalbard, looking for a place to film time-lapse footage and doing their best to keep their bodies and cameras as warm as possible.
Temperatures can go up to minus 35, so you need good gear and you need to set up your camera before you go out.
It's not a simple task to get where they need to go. They say it can take hours of driving their snowmobiles over terrain like this to find spots away from town where there is no light pollution. But they say the reward is worth the effort.
I really want to make a movie that people are going to see all over the world and understand better where Northern Lights are.
If they're successful, a documentary called Green Skies will be completed in 2017, and the world will watch the dance show in the sky.
Every once in a while, Mother Nature puts on a show here so spectacular it seems completely out of this world. That one is on my bucket list, perhaps yours too. I'm Cassie Leuffen. Thank you so much for joining me as the sun sets now on our Monday and the Northern Lights come out and dance. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Don't turn the lights on.